Ever heard the saying that trees are the lungs of the earth? Well, today we are in conversation with co-author of Sappi Tree Spotting, Val Thomas, to tell us more about the tree spotting experience.
Hey, we're good luck.
And you're watching Joburg today.
Now, I want to start this conversation with asking you a question I think many tree lovers would like to find out. Would you say Johannesburg has the largest urban forest in the world? Or would you say Rio's Tijuca's National Park?
It's such a challenging question, that, and I do get asked, and I really don't know the answer. I think it's one of those personal preference things, and I'm an ardent South African on every single level, every bone in my body. So yes, of course, Johannesburg's got the most trees urban of any city, but that's a biased answer. I don't really know the answer.
Okay, now let's go into where your love or your passion thereof for trees began.
I was not brought up in a family that went to the bush regularly, or my parents weren't passionate about bush things. And I was in my 30s the first time that I went to actually Botswana. And I was sitting on the banks of the river in the delta, and a jacana jumped onto a water lily leaf. And I was completely transported. It opened my eyes. And from then on, I became an ardent bird watcher. And my husband and I started the publishing company Jacana, which is the company that produced this book that we're going to be talking about. And really from there, we started to do a lot in wildlife, particularly in Kruger. And we got the contract to do the new Kruger map, looking at Kruger Park from a scientific perspective and dividing it into zones where people could expect certain kinds of basically vegetation. So the river is a zone where you get very tall trees because there's a lot of water. And over towards the east of Kruger, there are basalt plains on clay. And because it's clay, the trees are quite stunted, but there's a lot of grass. Now, because of that, you get the animals that eat the grass. So we produced a map for ordinary people to be able to say, wow, we're in a grassland on clay, or we're in granites, which make hills that roll like this, and then you get rivers in between, and you get different trees, different animals, different birds. It was a very big adventure producing that map. It was 4 or 5 years of hard work, and it was very successful. But out of that, we discovered that most ordinary game viewing Kruger lovers, wildlife lovers, very few of them knew their trees. And so I suddenly woke up that was an area that really needed to be developed. Everything's so integrated. You've got the landscape, you've got the weather, you've got the grasses, you've got the trees, you've got the birds, the animals, and everything influences everything else. People have to set aside money to get game reserves, to preserve, conserve. With our urban influence and our farming and our industrial areas, very little wildlife land is being left behind now. And people support rhinos, and they support lions, and they support birds. Birds are very, very popular. But until a bit more money and a bit more effort is put behind areas that really are high tree areas, we're losing vital ecosystems. And so it's become quite a complex passion for me. It's not just about, I've ticked the trees I've seen and I've got a list and I'm very proud of that list. It's the whole influence.
Now, before we go into the context that is in this book, would you just tell me what a typical tree spotting experience is?
For me, I just use the word friends because I'm so privileged. I've been doing this, as you can see, I'm in my 80s, and I started this in my 50s. So I've had 30 years, and my husband and I have covered every inch of South Africa. And I really am now very lucky that I know a lot of trees. And so wherever I go, whenever we're driving, I think, oh, hello, and oh, hello, oh, you're in flower now. Oh, look at your pods. And it is like a great big friendship club. It's so for me, tree spotting is a way of being. It's hard, but not everyone will be like that.
Yeah. Lovely, lovely. Now, you've mentioned that this book is not a book for your advanced, scientific, tree, well-versed people, but this is a book that very much goes into detail about trees and what exactly people need to look out for in trees. How did this target market come about, and why did you think your normal people out there need to find out more information about tree spotting?
Well, back to that map experience in Kruger, that we found that we'd interview hundreds of people that knew a lot about all sorts of things, even butterflies and hohos, but people really didn't know trees, because actually trees are very difficult to identify. So many of them are a brown trunk and a massive green foliage on the top, and they look pretty similar. One person looks at them and they can't really see the differences. So it took a couple of years, in fact it took 4 or 5 years, we slowly evolved a concept that we called look for the right tree in the right place. That if you were in a certain place in Kruger and you were along a river, the 3 or 4 likely trees to grow there, because of the soil, because of the rocks and the weather, because Kruger is a big place, so the weather in one place and another is different. Certain trees would do well there, and you'd be likely to find them. And so the way we put the first books together, the first one was the Lowveld, and it was in Kruger National Park. We took South Africa, and, it's at the beginning, and we divided it into 5 books. And this book is the Bushveld book, and it's the blue at the top here.
Okay.
Where the Limpopo.
In Limpopo, yeah.
Where the Limpopo. So this is the Bushveld book. And that immediately means you're limiting the number of trees. There are about 1,400 indigenous trees in South Africa that grow to over 3 meters. I mean, that's an enormous number. Yeah. So now once you go to just one area like Bushveld, that number is going to become, very much smaller. Then we take that a step further and we divide the Bushveld into various types. So this one is central Bushveld, and this is Thornveld. And central's got a C and it's pink, and Thornveld's grey and it's got a T. Then at the beginning of the book, so this is central, and now we divide it even further. We say if we're looking for the right tree in the right place, these are the trees in the riverine. These are the trees in rocky areas, or on the plains, or plateaus. And then right at the top, there are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees that you are most likely to find. So it's kind of like honing in. I gave you the example earlier. If I was looking for you, I'd really struggle if I started in Stanton City.
Yeah.
And I thought you might be Chinese, and I thought you were a blonde. But as soon as I know the address where you are, and how tall you are, and the beautiful black and white suit you're wearing, I'm going to find you very, very easily indeed. So this is like an address.
Yes, your location.
For a person who looks like this, or a tree that looks like this, you then gives you a page number, you go to that page, and it gives you the striking features of that tree, that you can now see. What does the leaf look like? What does the bark look like? What do the flowers look like? The fruit. And it gives you a diagram of, yes, you'll find it along rivers, and yes, you'll find it on flat plains, and you'll even find it in rocky areas.
Sure.
So it's very simple. It's
very, very simple. Now, how would you say then this book opens up your understanding to trees? How would you further then elaborate that factor?
I think it's a very simple thing about if you've never eaten Italian food, and then someone treats you to a pasta or a pizza, suddenly you start to take an interest in pastas and pizzas and Italian food if you enjoyed it. And what happens is that with this book you will find trees and you'll recognize them, and then you'll find one, and now because you know what to look for, you'll find others, and it starts to be, back to my word of a friendship club. You're driving along in Kruger and, oh, there's another marula, and there's another marula, or here's a sausage tree, or here's a leadwood. And it just starts to mean that your whole environment, it was a blank canvas. Now suddenly it's got these colored, beautiful, different images in them. And you start to get a deeper understanding of the whole context of the environment you're in.
Sure, Val. Now, this book, Sappi Tree Spotting, is a series, right?
Yes.
The first book was released in 1996.
I'm 80. I don't remember exactly, but around about that, yes. It was in the 90s, probably 4 or 5 or 6, yeah.
And
so
how was
that one was the red one here and had a bit of Zimbabwe in it. And then we moved on to Bushveld.
Okay.
And then we moved on to KwaZulu, Natal, and then Highlands, and finally this enormous area that's the Cape.
Now, Val, South Africa has a large indigenous variety of trees. How would you say they assist the ecosystem?
In an ecosystem has to relate to the other things around it. And I always like to focus in on us because we are so important. And if you now take that same tree and you make it a human tree, you can take every one of these main branches and you can say they, from very, very early man, I believe they gave us tools, trees gave us tools long before we were able to make stone tools. I believe we made wooden tools. We don't record that so carefully because in the ancient bones of humans, there are no wooden tools left because they just disintegrated. So it was only once we became into the Stone Age and chips of bone were left as scrapers and things, we could talk about tools. But the first tools were from the trees, the clubs, the knobkerries, the shields, the spears. Yes. All of those were based somehow. And then the music, so the drums that called the neighbors, that was the flutes. So we had music, we had food, the fruit from the famous marula with its amazing vitamin C, the medicines, so many trees. And our indigenous cultures through the country, the various different indigenous cultures have the most fascinating information about so many diseases. And it's being proved now, many of the things that people believed from 1,000 years ago are valid. So then we start talking about transport and early wagons and boats and household tools, bowls and spoons. And I could go on forever.
You are working on something right now outside of the Sappi Tree Spotting book. Can you quickly share with us what that is?
Yes, I'd love to. Basically, as I said to you, this is the beginners series and it launches people. And I have hundreds of people that I know who have really launched their tree careers here. But you do eventually, I think there are 480 trees in the Sappi Tree Spotting series, which is a lot. Wow. It's a good start. But then what about the other 1,000? So I've moved on now to the Tree App South Africa. We launched this, the first edition of Tree App South Africa on the 17th of September 2017. And on the 17th of September this year, we're going to launch the second edition, which was with this cover.
Very exciting times. Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kathleen. I enjoyed that. Thank you.